Why do I get sucked back in? I'm commonly asked by people, HG, why do I keep getting sucked back in to the dance with the narcissist? It's a very valid question indeed. First of all, we need to establish what is it that you're actually getting sucked back into. And this breaks down into 3 scenarios. The first, you're drawn back into the formal relationship. The second, you're drawn back into a vague relationship. The status isn't exactly clear. Third, there is no relationship, but there is some form of continued engagement. This video is applicable to the situation where you have escaped the narcissist, not where you've been disengaged from. So this is where there has been escape, and thereafter you keep getting drawn back in. You have had sufficient fortitude to make the decision to leave the narcissist, to terminate the relationship. And usually this is a romantic one, but it could apply to a business one, social one, or familial one also. You have had the drive and the determination to say, enough of this. I'm ending it, and thereafter wanting nothing more to do with the narcissist. You want the narcissist to stay away. You don't want the relationship to start again. You don't want to be boyfriend and girlfriend again. You don't want to be business associates. You don't want there to be any familial interaction. You want it done, dusted, and over. Yet somehow, you get drawn back in. Why? Dealing with the resurrection of the formal relationship, this occurs for 2 reasons. First of all, hoovering. Where you have escaped us, you have threatened our control on a massive scale, and therefore, particularly if you are high up in our fuel matrix, you're not allowed to do that. Nobody, no matter what their position is in the fuel matrix, is allowed to treat us this way. But a tertiary source might be dispensed with. The narcissist determining never liked them anyway, and deems it as if they are the one that is in effect therefore let that tertiary source go. Maybe even a non-intimate secondary source could be viewed in that way. But with the primary source and intimate partner secondary sources, and sometimes with non-intimate secondary sources as well, if you are the one that has escaped, not only does this cause considerable wounding to us, but it quite simply won't do. We are the doers. We are not the done to. We are the controllers. We are not the controlled. And therefore, this act on your part of escaping us causes a huge wounding to us. And therefore, we must address it. Accordingly, we don't sit idly by and think, oh well, she's left me, ho-hum. Better open a packet of crisps and sit back and watch another series of The Crown. But no. Instead, the narcissist is compelled by the loss of this chief member or important member of the fuel matrix to act. And therefore you get hoovered. And invariably, you probably haven't put in place an appropriate no-contact regime so that your defences are easily surmounted. The narcissist, where you are the intimate partner primary source, will give you the initial grand hoover. Sometimes that might be used against an intimate partner secondary source, but that's usually left and aimed at the intimate partner primary source. We hoover you in this blitzkrieg, a frenzied attempt to draw you back in, bombarding you with calls, text messages, possibly gifts, possibly threats, turning up at your house, turning up at your work. And you can read more about that and how that happens in the book No Contact. If you don't put in place a solid no contact regime, the initial grand hoover, or with other appliances the repeated follow-up hoovers, get through. And because they get through, you then have exposure to us. And then this leads us into the second reason why you get drawn back into the formal relationship. You've decided you wanted it to end. So why can't you stick with that decision? And this is where the emotional thinking comes into play. Firstly, because the relationship has only just ended, your emotional thinking can only be in one place, high. Why? Because you've been interacting with us. You've been spending time with us. You've been communicating with us. You've been doing things for us. You've been talking about us. You've been thinking about us. All of those things feed your emotional thinking. And therefore, at the point of cessation, even though you've left, your emotional thinking will remain pretty high. And therefore, it is only shortly thereafter that the narcissist will start hoovering you, either the initial grand hoover or follow-up hoovers. It follows that because your emotional thinking is high, you probably haven't applied logic, and therefore you haven't put in place a solid no-contact regime. Therefore, your high emotional thinking means it's easier for our hoovers to get through. When those hoovers get through, what are they? More interaction. If you're interacting with us, what happens? One of the things that happens is your emotional thinking goes upwards. Therefore, as a consequence of existing high emotional thinking and added emotional thinking, because the hoovers have got through, we're able to talk to you, you read our texts, you reply to our texts, you give us an audience, you then fall prey to not thinking logically. So when we are hoovering you and saying, please come back to me, I've made a mistake, look, I'll change, you fall for it because your empathic trait of the desire to heal and to fix is corrupted by your emotional thinking and what we are saying. So you come back. Or, I really love you and I'll do anything to save this marriage. Please just give me another chance. Love devotee trait is corrupted. You feel sorry for us. The snivelling, whinging, crybaby, mid-range type B. Excuse me while I use some hand wash just to make myself feel cleaner after referring to those odious individuals. Their snivelling pity plays results in your empathic trait of compassion being corrupted by your high emotional thinking, so you feel sorry for the narcissist and give them another chance. Sometimes it's your narcissistic traits that are corrupted, pride, that you want to think, okay, I will show you that this can be done. I'm going to show you what you've missed out on. And therefore, I'm not going to let you get off. I'm going to keep you, and this time you're going to behave yourself, Mr. Narcissist. So, you get sucked back into the formal relationship as a consequence of the following. You escaped, which means we are hoovering you, either initial grand hoover or follow-up hoovers. 2, because you've just escaped, you have high emotional thinking, which means you're not applying logic. That means you're more likely to have a poor no-contact regime. Our hoovers get through, leading to 3, increased emotional thinking as a consequence of this additional engagement. And therefore, the combination of high emotional thinking and added emotional thinking caused by the successful hoovering results in the corruption of your empathic or narcissistic traits so that you resume the formal relationship. Sometimes it's because you're frightened into doing it. Sometimes you are persuaded and charmed into doing it. Sometimes it's because you think that it's the decent thing to give us another chance. Sometimes you think that it's the right thing to do in terms of compassion. Sometimes you think that it's the right thing to do in terms of attending to your vows with regard to giving the relationship another chance. There's lots of different ways that your emotional thinking will corrupt your empathic or narcissistic traits to draw you back in, and you're applying flawed logic. Your resolve basically evaporates, it dissipates. And whereas once it was strong to get yourself away, the combination of the pre-existing levels of emotional thinking, which are then topped up because the hoovers get through, and the hoovers get through because of your existing emotional thinking, meaning you don't have an appropriate no-contact regime, results in you getting sucked back in to the formal relationship, and you resume being boyfriend and girlfriend, you give the marriage another chance, you halt the divorce proceedings, etc., etc. This risk of being sucked back in this way is why, when you do leave, it has to be go-so. You get out and you stay out. Full and total no-contact regime. So you don't top up your emotional thinking and you give it time to reduce. If none of the hoovers get through, you are far less likely to then want the relationship to resume. And your resolve will hold. And that is why you should utilize my work as to the appropriate no-contact regime and staying out of the 5 arenas of interaction. So the first instance as to why you get sucked back in appertains to the circumstances of a formal relationship and because of hoovering and emotional thinking. What then about the second circumstance, the vague relationship? Here, you are not actually drawn back into becoming boyfriend and girlfriend again or giving the marriage another chance and moving back in and carrying on as husband and wife, but instead it becomes something amorphous and vague. Are we seeing each other again? Are we just dating and seeing where we're getting to? We are spending time together, but he isn't always here. What is it? Well, there's a continuing interaction. And because there is a continuing interaction, it means it works for us. We've decided, either instinctively, we're lesser or mid-range, or consciously, we're the greater or ultra, that a formal relationship of boyfriend and girlfriend, or that the marriage continuing, isn't necessary. Instead, we've selected this halfway house, if you will. And why has that been done? Because it benefits us. We're still able to draw fuel from you, control you, get character traits and residual benefits, whilst it not impinging on other things that are occurring. So it might be, for instance, you escaped and you put a huge hole in the narcissist's fuel matrix because of that escape. And the narcissist didn't have a replacement ready. And so what the narcissist does, and he might have started with a replacement, he wants to hedge his bets. And therefore, rather than allow you to go before he is ready to let you go, you're pulled back in. And the narcissist is continuing cultivating somebody else whilst maintaining this vague relationship with you. So he's not committing all of his resources to you as he would do ordinarily with the formal relationship. And therefore, this vague amorphous status of not really sure what's going on, but there are continuing interactions between the two of you, is because this is what the narcissist wants, to enable the narcissist to continue his or her aims. How does that come about? Basically the same way as it does with the formal relationship. When you escaped, your emotional thinking was high, which means that you probably won't have put in place an effective no-contact regime and you'll make mistakes. The narcissist hoovers you, perhaps not with the full force of an initial grand hoover, but something not far behind it, and therefore tops up your emotional thinking because those hoovers were successful, and the narcissist draws you back in. What often happens is that the narcissist looks to draw you back in as if starting the formal relationship up again. Let's get back to the way that we were. Please give me another chance to make it work. And once you accede to that and give the narcissist control, the narcissist reneges on it and instead takes you into this place of a vague relationship. You fall for it, because your empathic and sometimes narcissistic traits have once again been corrupted by this high emotional thinking. You thought, okay, I will give the relationship another chance. I feel sorry for him. Perhaps this time he's learned his lesson. Or she looks like she wants to make change. And therefore, you are duped into believing that the formal relationship will start up again. The narcissist doesn't come along and say, how about we have this vague transitionary period? That won't work. So the narcissist approaches you, hoovering you to try and get the formal relationship on track again, to resurrect it. You, driven by emotional thinking and flawed logic, agree, and then you find that the narcissist actually doesn't commit to the formal relationship, but instead gives you this vague amorphous hinterland, this halfway house. You, of course, don't then immediately escape, because your emotional thinking has soared again, and it keeps you stuck because you want to try and work out, well, I thought we were back together again, but what is this? He comes and goes. I need to find out what's going on. Your truth seeker trait then becomes corrupted by your high emotional thinking. Or you are determined to try and make it work. And even though it's not quite working at the moment, you're not going to give up. After all, didn't the narcissist say that he wanted it to work? Well, if he did, let's make it work. Corruption of your desire to heal and fix. So in the second situation, you get sucked back in because the narcissist starts off with the hoovering. The hoovering gets through because your no-contact regime is not as good as it should have been. And when the hoovering gets through, it increases your emotional thinking. And you are conned by the narcissist, who intends it at the time where lesser or mid-range, or gives the impression of intending it but doesn't where greater or ultra, to draw you back into the formal relationship. When you agree to that, you then find that actually you're not given that, and the narcissist gives you this vague, amorphous situation instead. What about the third situation where you get sucked back in? This is where there isn't any relationship, whether formal or vague. And this happens primarily because you won't stay away from us. Although you've determined that you want to escape, and you've ended that relationship, and it might be that the narcissist has then secured an alternative primary source very quickly, and therefore isn't interested in dealing with you any further, but you keep kicking the hornet's nest. You won't leave it be. You don't want to be in a relationship with us, and the narcissist doesn't want to be in a relationship with you either. But you get sucked back into some form of engagement because, although you say the relationship is over, you don't actually abide by that. Why? You keep asking us for answers as to why the relationship foundered. You keep wanting to get us to see that we are a narcissist. You keep wanting to get us to see how much we have hurt you. You go around telling everybody else that we are a narcissist. You go around telling everybody else what a lowlife and scumbag we are. You go around perhaps threatening a situation with regard to employment, or trying to jeopardize our new relationship in some kind of misguided revenge campaign. And so whilst you have escaped and the former relationship has ended, what you haven't done is cut all ties, and you keep coming back. And if you then keep coming back, we have to respond to that. Why are you coming back? It's because your emotional thinking is too high. If you abided by the principle of get out and stay out, and focused on lowering your emotional thinking and applying logic, you would realize it is not logical to continue to interact with the narcissist in these ways, even though the formal relationship is over. I must stop doing it. But of course, you have an addiction to the narcissist way, or an empath, and your emotional thinking wants to feed that addiction. So it gets you believing that doing all of these things is sensible, that it is appropriate that you keep kicking the narcissist by telling him that he's an arsehole, that you keep going back, trying to get answers out of the narcissist of why he or she has treated you the way that they've done. I don't want to be back in a relationship, you say, but you still keep coming to us to try and get answers. Or you keep talking about it with all of your friends, or you're letting it occupy your thoughts, or you're reminiscing about the golden period, and I don't want to be back with him, but you keep thinking about it. When this happens, you are still engaging with us, and in effect, you have been sucked back in, not by us, but by your emotional thinking, causing you, in effect, to keep the relationship alive in a different form, by continuing to get you to engage with us. And thus you are entering the 5 arenas of interaction, and that is adverse because you're giving us fuel, which means that we win. You'll be suffering an adverse consequence as well. Because if you keep trying to get answers out of us, we'll ignore you, so you get upset about it, or you might get malign hoovers, because we have to assert control over you, because your repeated questioning of us, the explanations, the demands for answers threaten our control, and we might assert control over you initially by ignoring you, and then because that's not working, we have to dole out malign hoovers, namely, stay away from me, you crazy bitch. If you keep coming around here, Mr. Ex-Boyfriend, I'm going to get a restraining order against you. Your emotional thinking, although it isn't strong enough to make you want to go back into the formal relationship with a narcissist, it chooses an alternative route to make that addiction get fed. And so what it does is it causes you to keep interacting with us, ringing us up, texting us, telling us how horrible we are, demanding answers from us, trying to get property back by dealing with us directly, arguing about money, arguing about the situation with the children, rather than getting it resolved through court. Trying to point out to everybody what a schmuck we've been, what an arsehole we've been, how horrible we are, what a harpy and harridan that we have been. All of that is a continued engagement, and you've lost insight because of your increased emotional thinking, and you're actually being sucked back in. The people that say, oh yeah, I'm kicking the narcissist's butt, I'm giving him hell. No, you're being deluded by your emotional thinking. You are carrying on engaging with us, and therefore we are actually winning and you're losing. You can't see it. You get sucked back in as a consequence of either us hoovering and a combination of your emotional thinking, or your emotional thinking compelling you to continue the interaction with us, contrary to your best interests. If you want to avoid getting sucked back in, when you've escaped, and well done for doing so, you have to make it complete, which means total no-contact regime, staying out of the 5 arenas of interaction to prevent hoovering and driving down your emotional thinking. Want to know how to execute that? Consult with me and I'll show you precisely how it's done and guide you through the process so that you achieve. You can avoid being drawn back into the quicksand of the engagement with the narcissist, whether it's formal relationship, vague relationship, or no relationship but continued engagement. I have the tools and I'll provide them to you. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.